Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful introduction. I think that was probably the best one yet. So let's give her a round of applause for her research. It's really an honor and a privilege for me to be here. And Sarah's given me instructions. If you know her, you know that you're going to get instructions from her when you've agreed to do anything. So I'm standing here and will not move because we have an audience virtually as well, and we want to keep them included in our conversation. Today is just a wonderful day, both in, I think nature and weather has smiled on us, but also smiling on us is our good fortune to be able to spend time together around this topic that is so important to our community of Greenville, both the city and in the county. So I hope that you will engage with me and also feel free to ask any questions that you might have regarding this work and or any suggestions that you might want to share with me as well. As Sarah said in her introduction, in May of 2020, we all witnessed from our homes in the middle of the pandemic what was a national atrocity in the death of George Floyd, very publicly and violently, if you will. His life eked out from him on the television screen for all of us, whether willingly or unwillingly, to witness. That then marked a change in how some of our nonprofit and civic leaders engaged with each other. Megan Barb, the CEO and president of the United Way, reached out to Carlos Phillips, the president and CEO of the Greenville Chamber of Commerce. And in a conversation, Megan asked Carlos, "How are you doing?" And of course, he gave the standard answer, and she pressed and said, "No, how are you doing?" The two of them then took that conversation to a broader audience, which would then include myself and then Sean Dogan, Reverend Dogan, pastor at Long Branch Baptist Church, but also then the interim executive director or president and CEO of the Urban League of the Upstate. Now Gail Wilson-Awan assumes that role and is also at the table, a part of that dialogue. That conversation would grow to include a number of leaders initially discussing the experiences that we were having, especially as men of color, people of color in leadership roles in our community. And for me, it was the first time that I was able to take that breath and actually check in with myself in the middle of what was unprecedented times, to include the pandemic, but also dealing with my own feelings about this particular death in front of us. And I of course, the way that I dealt with that was to talk to now colleagues and friends. At the time, I had a Great Pyrenees who was beloved pet and family member of ours, our four-legged family member that I raised from the time he could fit in the palm of my hand till he was big. If you know anything about the Great Pyrenees breed, he was a big boy. Yes, and I loved it. I couldn't see myself out with a teacup poodle walking, but I'd rather have something that was more present. So we raised Sam, and literally Sam could stand on his hind legs and put his paws on my shoulder without me bending over. He was just that big of a dog. But I live in the North Main community, and I was conscious of my routine. And that was every morning when I would get up to walk Sam, I would reach for his leash, I would reach for his bags, and I would slip my driver's license in my pocket, consciously wanting to have validation of my presence in my neighborhood. And so I shared that conversation with colleagues and friends on a Zoom call, and not realizing how comfortable I had become with that routine, why it was necessary for me to do that, and the parallel to what happened with George Floyd. And could that happen to me? Could that happen in our community? with all of the ancillary issues facing our community. Sarah mentioned that I had the great privilege of chairing our public safety review commission that was commissioned by our city council immediately following this issue with George Floyd. And so I had the privilege of sitting and going through documents and pages of policy as it related to public safety in Greenville. And the big question for the commission and for my colleagues at that time, just prior to this Racial Equity and Economic Mobility Commission being formed, was, could this happen in Greenville? What do we have in place that would keep that from being Greenville on the national news? So we did our work on that particular commission and made recommendations. I was excited about that, expanded my network of more colleagues, but I wouldn't know until engaging in the racial equity and economic mobility work how committed leaders from across the breadth of Greenville city and county were to engaging in policy. Sarah mentioned that there are 5 areas: income and wealth, education, health and wellness, criminal justice, and community-wide learning are those areas that we were focused on. And those areas all had policy and professionals who were all engaged in this work. So the commission was formed out of the conversation between Megan and Carlos that grew to include others who were working behind the scenes already in this work, but also waking up every day conscious of how we show up in the spaces that we have been trusted to work in. And what does that mean? And how are we impacting the larger community, the broader society with this work? So for 2.5 years, I say we were sequestered because it was the pandemic. We all were wearing masks. We all were social distancing, and we were hiding out, so to speak, over at the Greenville Convention Center weekly to discuss policy in those 5 areas. We then broke into those 5 subgroups and had chairs. Dr. Elizabeth Davis and myself chaired the education subcommittee, and we met often here just up the hill with our subcommittee and a slew of professionals to include our superintendent, Dr. Burke Royster, and key members of his team and staff to talk about how our Black boys and girls are doing in the public school setting. We not only did that for education, it repeated itself for health and wellness, income and wealth, criminal justice, and community-wide learning, all having those folks who are working every day behind the scenes engaged in those conversations and the committee work. What grew from that then became recommendations from each of those subgroups to the larger group and then to the community. If you've been on our website, you've seen that there is a report that was released around the time that I became the executive director between May and June. That was one of the first tasks that we had, was to get that information out to our community and to share with you what those recommendations were, but not only that, what the philosophies were behind our deciding to do the work that we were doing. So in May, I was asked to be the first full-time executive director of the Racial Equity and Economic Mobility Commission in Greenville, REAM. And often I'll wake up and check in with myself to make sure that that was exactly what I wanted to do, and it is today still. And the reason why is because we had more than 30 professionals from industry, Michelin representatives, to higher education, Dr. Davis, and to our municipal leaders, our mayor, our county council person, our chief of police, our sheriff, and everywhere in between, who stayed in place, even in what was some of the most difficult times in their own individual industries, to deliver their daily work, but then to add on this work of consciousness as it relates to the Black population and its access to quality of life in Greenville. And I can tell you that to a person, everybody was committed and determined to do this work. And so it prompted me, after 14 years of serving in higher education administration, to think about how could I be more involved and have a deeper dive in our community to engage more. Well, these are the words that stood out for me. Transform boldly. These are mission-specific guides that were used for this discussion or the work that we embarked upon. And behind transforming boldly, the group said, we choose courage over comfort by addressing matters that align with our mission and vision that will eradicate race-based disparities and inequities facing Black lives in our community. That was one of the first lines that drew my attention, and it drew my attention because we don't always get to the core and speak to the issues. We talk in very broad terms of how people are faring in our community without ever really pulling back the layers to see why. Are there connections to policy that give us the results that we have? And so there's some folks with some numbers out in the audience today who have volunteered to assist me. And I'm just going to ask you, there's 6 of you, to randomly call those numbers. That will serve somewhat as a test for me to see if I'm doing well on my job and if I actually know what I'm talking about. So any one of you that has that number, please go ahead. 40,000. 40,000 is the average household income for Blacks in Greenville County. $40,000 is what that number represents. Ms. Payne.
98,225.
98,225 is the actual number of Black people that live in Greenville County. 98,225 according to the most recent census data. 48,000 is the average household income for Hispanics in Greenville County. 48,000 in dollars is the average household income for Hispanic families in Greenville.
533,834.
533,824 is the total population for Greenville County in people. Total population in people of Greenville County. So you see how these numbers are working. Go ahead. 70,000 is the average household income for white families in Greenville. For white families in Greenville. I should have 1 or 2 more. 76.1% is the percentage of the white of our total population that identify as white. 76.1%.
Can I add, I attended a conference representing the Society of Clinical Social Work in Seattle earlier this year. And the big concern is that ASWB, which is the agency that's doing the licensing all around the country, that 40% of minorities are failing that exam to become licensed clinical social workers in the South, including Greenville, and they're really doing nothing to address it. So I thought that was an interesting.
So there are folks on Zoom, and a member of the audience attended a social work conference in Seattle, Washington, and there is a statistic stating that 40% of the folks who are taking that test who represent as people of color are not passing the licensure exam in the South. And of course, there's a lot of psychology behind standardized testing and how standardized tests are put together or organized and how that plays out, and on several levels, not just that particular standardized test, the SAT, the ACT, and other tests that are used. to measure acumen as well. So I share those numbers really not to be a know-it-all, but to really help us to understand from a aggregation of where the disparities are. The number of people in our population versus the income, the housing income. 80% of homes owned in our community are owned by whites. Less than 20% are owned by people of color. Yes, sir. Good Fred.
Yes, how you doing?
Good, sir. How are you?
Are those numbers you may have stated, those are 2021, 2020. Those numbers are for NAP for 2020.
Those are the most current numbers that we have, and we just wrote a grant to address health disparities, healthcare disparities, and we pulled those numbers from the most recent census data for Greenville County, and those are available for us. Yes, 2020. Yes. Yeah. So those are numbers that you can have access to pretty easily. So when we talk about transforming boldly and being willing to face the facts, first of all, to know why there is such a large number of students of color who find themselves in high rates of discipline in our public school system. To know why there is a large number of folks who are of color using the emergency room as their healthcare home provider. And to do that work, not only does REAM seek to transform boldly, but a next phrase that caught my attention in making this decision is to act with humility. And the language behind that was, we acknowledge that this work takes continual curiosity, persistence, and humility as we approach issues that require and invite varying levels of awareness, education, and vulnerability. And that phrase again was act with humility. And one of the things that I found most enlightening as a commissioner, I will say I was asked to be a commissioner and served for those 2.5 years as the commission was doing its work, engaging with colleagues across the network, but then also doing the personal work to get proximate, and that's what was required. So you've got 30 well-trained, well-heeled leaders from our community that not only are embracing the policies that they work with and that inform their daily work and their particular professions and their careers, but to actually think about how that impacts them personally. We had something called racial healing circles, where we broke into small groups and had conversations amongst ourselves about the first time that we encountered racism, whether Black or white, how we experienced that and what that did to shape our perspective of our society where we were living. And so from senior pastors in Greenville serving some of our most prominent denominations and large congregations to our sheriff and our mayor sitting in a circle talking about their own personal experiences certainly drew me in to want to be engaged with this work, because we were now trusted with being vulnerable with each other in those spaces and becoming proximate with each other's personal stories. And all of us, to a person, had a story. And we shared those stories and we came to know each other and to actually evaluate how that those experiences would impact our daily work. The third thing that drew my attention was centering trust. To center trust. And just like I said just a moment ago, that we spent time getting proximate with each other, learning each other's stories, but also relying on the data and centering Black voices. So we reached beyond the group of commissioners to go into the community. For instance, I co-chaired the education subcommittee and was curious about the data and curious about the families and I'll share with you a little bit later what my perspective is and has been since becoming the executive director and how we've laid out this body of work. But I was curious and challenged our group to engage the people about whom the data was written. We could spend a lot of time at a very high level engaged with each other, talking very philosophically, but we're talking about people who live and breathe and shop and go to the grocery store in Greenville that we come in contact with on a regular basis. So why not ask? So we had sessions that included parents whose children were in the public school system to find out how they were faring. Did they know about advanced placement courses? I'm grateful. Someone asked me earlier, my oldest son just graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point this past December, and we were all there. And my mom's oldest sister, who's 97 years old, and their oldest brother, who's 89, and his wife, who's 85, and their next oldest sister, 77 years old, and my mom all boarded a flight to go with us to witness my son's graduation. It was meaningful for them in ways that I could never embrace or understand, that our family for generations now represented on the front row. I don't know how he managed that, landed to get them all on the front row for his graduation, but it happened. And I told them when we arrived, before we got to the airport, now look, all 5 of you are getting in wheelchairs because that's just going to be the easiest way for us to get through security and onto the plane. I know you've got your pride and I know you can walk, but I need you to do what I'm asking you to do. And so we all went there. My son is a product of Greenville County Schools, public. Was student body president at Jailman High School his senior year, and was class president every year leading up to that. My daughter just graduated last year. She leapfrogged him. She's younger than him, but she graduated from Spelman College a year early, magna cum laude with 0 debt, also a product of Greenville County Schools. Taking AP courses. She didn't want to graduate early. In fact, she didn't want her classmates to know she was graduating early, because at Spelman, you come in a cohort and all of those girls love each other and hang out with each other. And she couldn't bear leaving them early until she realized that that would save us a whole year's tuition and there might be a car for her in the midst of it. And there was. But for me and for my family, and our third child is a junior at Greenville High, who's playing football and enjoying his time, choosing not to go to Jailman High School. And of course, our living in a different location now allows him to go to school that he wants to go to. And none of them wanted to go with their mom, my wife of 25 years, to Eastside High, where she has taught for the last 22 years biological sciences, and chooses to be in the classroom, chooses to be engaged with her students, and is representative of a very extreme minority of science teachers who look like her and engage with her students in the way that she does. We're very intentional about that. Why do I mention it? I mention it because it's possible that families from different backgrounds are having different experiences. And just because that's my experience and the experience of my family does not mean that that's the experience of other families in our community. How then do we become more intentional around helping that playing field be more level for students of color? My children took AP courses, advanced placement, which allowed them to be able to finish school with high school with college credits already in line. And really, if they were the students of today, they may be behind because they now are able to have dual enrollment in school, meaning that they're in high school. Not only can they take an advanced placement course, but they can actually enroll in college courses and get their basic general education taken while they're still in high school. And that information needs to be getting out, not just to select groups, but to all the groups, and engage those students. I have one more thing, and then I'll take your questions, and I see a hand out there. So beyond centering trust, we also said that we would work collectively, that we would collaborate strategically with local community partners on meaningful initiatives to influence real systems and change. So I want to fast forward really quick because you know that Sarah's given me instructions and I'm going to adhere to them. I've got 5 minutes to tell you what the last 6 months has looked like at Ream. And I'll tell you, I joined or became the executive director, and I'm an organization of one today, except for Friday, we did offer to a program manager who accepted, who graduated from the College of Charleston with dual degrees in communications and African-American studies. And I'm excited to welcome Courtney Hicks to Greenville to work as my colleague in this labor. She will start on February the 13th, and I'm very excited about that. And then I will no longer be an organization of one, but I will have another person that's doing some work and is well placed and informed. She has worked at the Avery Center and at the College of Charleston in Charleston doing precisely this level of work, and will come to Greenville and bring her expertise in that area to assist us in a broader way. So what have we done? So after becoming executive director, I wanted to further expose our community and engage those people who are affected most by this data. When Sarah was introducing me, she mentioned that we don't have a very good track record when it comes to helping poor people get out of poverty. And a child born in poverty in one of the greatest communities in the United States for vacationing and beauty and food and culture, those children are remaining in poverty. And so this work that we do every day challenges us to think about, why is that? What can we do to help those families and those children get out of poverty? So we launched the series of town halls. Our first one was in October, and that was education. And we went to where the people are at Phyllis Wheatley Community Center. And we held our first town hall there to talk about this data and to engage our current school leaders in a conversation about the numbers, graduation rates, and also discipline rates, and how our students are able to fare and be better through Greenville County schools. That was a great session. Our next session is income and wealth, and it's happening on MLK Day. I chose that day on purpose because the civil rights movement, as you know, was framed by at least 3 pillars. The first of which was political justice. The second was social justice. The third, economic justice. And Dr. King was turning to work on economic justice when he was assassinated. And he was there to lead a march for equal pay for sanitation workers. And his life was cut down. And so we pick up somewhat that mantle to discuss, at least in Greenville, what does income and wealth look like from a policy perspective, and how does that impact the families of color in our community? You heard the astounding, disparate number as it relates to average household income for Blacks in our community, $40,000. Our counterparts at $70,000 and $48,000 as we measure. So Monday night, the 16th, we will have the next town hall at the Phyllis Wheatley Community Center. Alyssa Richardson, who is most recently the state director and chief of staff for Senator Tim Scott's office. She is a Furman graduate, went on to earn a law degree, a Juris Doctorate at Harvard, and will be here in Greenville to speak to us on policies that are currently in play that impact housing and people of color as it relates to income and wealth and the ability to pull themselves out of poverty. We also will have a panel discussion about the civil rights movement and the face of the civil rights movement in 2023. The Reverend Vincent Royal, the new pastor at Springfield Baptist Church, he chose a different fraternity, by the way, guys, so we're not going to hold that against him. He's an alpha. Vincent Royal, the newly elected state representative Wendell Jones will be a part of that panel. He's also a pastor at Changing Your Mind Ministries. He was elected to fill the seat vacated by Leola Robinson Simpson, House District number 25. He will be on that panel. Liz Bieber, the executive director of United Ministries, also a pastor, but has done great work in the area of equity and race, and will be part of that panel discussion. And Rabbi Sam Rose, the rabbi at Temple Israel, will share in that discussion. And the Phyllis Wheatley Repertory Theater will perform. And in that robust discussion, we're starting at 6, hope to have you out by 7:30. And that will be the next installment of the town hall for the 5 areas that we've been working on. And then the third one will be health and wellness, and that will be in April, also at Phyllis Wheatley, criminal justice in May. And then we will end the calendar year in terms of our fiscal year with a economic mobility summit at the Greenville Convention Center, June the 14th and 15th, to talk about estate planning and helping families learn the language around economics and how to stand their families up. So that's what we've been up to since becoming the executive director at REAM, but also standing up this organization as a viable organization, not only getting information out to people, but actually back office filling, as you heard, hiring staff, and establishing our presence in our community as an organization doing the work. It's a lot. But we're engaged, and I'm encouraged by being able to come have conversations like today. The United Way gives us our framework. Sarah asked this question earlier. So our documentation of our efforts and our work will come out in another report to share the data, to let you know how we're doing. We were awarded, along with several other organizations in our community, a $4 million grant from the State Department of Health and Human Services to address health disparities. Live Well Greenville is the lead agent on that. Furman University is doing the research for that, quantitative or qualitative, and Clemson University is doing the other, qualitative or quantitative. They are swapping whichever area of research that they're going to do. And then the Hispanic Alliance and REAM will do the work of getting the social pieces of having somebody dedicated to engage with the community in a way that helps break down those barriers and get people to a better healthcare home, as opposed to using the emergency rooms at our hospitals for their healthcare homes. So I was challenged to stop at 1. It is 1:03. I'm stopping, and we'll entertain questions. And the first question goes to the lovely lady with the lovely scarf. That's almost a Carolina color from what I can see. I'm not going to get you in trouble, though.
We have been participating, I don't know, I have reached that one, public schools with the preschool Head Start. That's a program that's been around since mid-60s, and it really made a difference, having been a primary school teacher, that if they come from Head Start, you know we are going to go places in school.
You'd like to know that I am a product of Head Start in Spartanburg County. And yes, ma'am, Head Start and Share Homeless Services here in our community is a part of our network of folks that we're engaged with and continuing on. One thing that I didn't get to mention is that coming into this role, I was sure to know that REAM is not the only organization that has been at work gathering this information and trying to get to better. So what we've been doing is network mapping, and on my wall in my office is a large diagram that shows all of the organizations that I'm aware of or that I can engage with that have been doing the work, and we're wanting to come alongside to build a coalition so that we're not recreating, but that we're helping to lift those organizations up. And that is painstakingly detailed work to find out where they are and to also build that relationship. So that's important to me, that we not show up as the big kid on the playground with all the answers when there have been folks that have been in the trenches doing that work. Share and Head Start is one of those groups, or both of those are, and we want to partner with them to help get their message out as well. Thank you for that question.
I, pre-COVID, I was volunteering for a I-mobile service society. And there is an area that was across from downtown St. Francis, back over in the neighborhood. And the people of color in that neighborhood were too afraid to even come to the mobile. And it was at one of the churches, and the pastor, he was a man of color. He said he had gone door to door, and the people were too afraid to even come out. And, you know, it was the worst situation that I had seen going throughout the upstate, and I had no idea how anything could be done to help.
Sure.
If you had any suggestions.
Thank you for your work, and not that I'm everything and connected to everybody, but Dr. Brad Williams, who works with Servants for Sight, is my optometrist, and these glasses just came from him. So it's a true story. I'm serious. I really don't have an answer for that, except that this is what the mantra is that I will operate off of. I've served in this community for 25 years as a senior pastor in a church that is literally on the other side of the tracks. And these are domestic people who go to work every day, and they're in survival mode. And during the pandemic, all of the issues that they were already dealing with were laid bare or exacerbated by a situation of sickness and health, and in many cases, death. And getting from survival to thriving is where we are in this interval. And getting people to the eye doctor, or getting people to better manage their personal health, regardless of race. But in this case, this demographic, the numbers that we saw during the pandemic were exceptionally or exponentially higher than other demographics in our community. You know, one leader said that when America catches a cold, Black America gets pneumonia. And to build trust with people, to get them to come out of their home, to get exams, it's tough, but it has to happen one home at a time and one person at a time. So thank you for your volunteer work. Thank you for being committed to that. And we've got to stay at it. We've got to continue to push forward. And even when there's one person that won't, there might be two that will. We have to find them. And that's the work that we're doing. And we don't undervalue the work of churches. Churches are still very valid in our community, and still a place of information beyond our theological responsibilities. Black churches have always been socially responsible as well. We have been sources of information, as well as the theology of whatever the denomination is.
And thank you for this presentation, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
But I'm wondering, I know college children and Connor and David, a woman that goes TD Bank, president of local TD Bank, are supported personally. But I'm wondering how the business community at large is weighing in on this. What is your perspective?
Thank you so much for that, the statement and the question. Yes, both Carlos and David and Reverend Dogan and Gail and Megan and Merle Code constitute the board of folks that I report to, and that are, in fact, at 2 p.m. I'm meeting with them to share that I've been here with you guys today. So they are engaged. Their networks are also engaged. I've given a similar presentation to the Chamber's Board of Directors, and have been invited to have conversations with members of the Chamber of Commerce. So those business networks are wanting to know just how. It's almost like double dutch. If you jump rope at all, you got to know the rhythm and when to get involved and how to get involved. And they have funding cycles, but many of them don't just want to write the check. They want their experts at the table as well. So for instance, Michelin North America had one of their vice presidents as a commissioner. So these aren't folks who are at arm's length saying we want to be a part of this. They're saying, show us how we can be closer. And of course, we've had to write the narrative to help these businesses come closer and be a part of what we're doing. And we don't want everybody to rush out to the playground and there's not room for them to play. We want to give them specifics to do. In fact, I think I'm on the hook with at least one person in this room for volunteers and showing you how to get engaged. And I think I'm going to be getting a call very shortly about that, because we promised to do that. And what we wanted to do was to have opportunities on a regular for volunteer training to get involved with all 5 of these areas, whether it's healthcare or education, criminal justice, or whatever. So that's a very good question. And I think that we're on a path to better. And that path, we're going to collect those people who are going to ride with us for this. And by the way, this isn't the first time Greenville has embarked on such a endeavor. And so we're wanting to invite people to come along and ride with us this time again as well. One more question. And I know we're getting near time for y'all to disappear, but if you've got my numbers, I want to get those back. Okay. No problem. But no, I was saying if you participated as a volunteer with reading off the number, I'll take that sheet back.
Yeah, to help close the income gap, I was wondering what could be done to get more young black men into the construction.
Wow.
They seem to be dominated by Hispanics. They face language barriers that, are difficult. I see very few young black men working in the construction trades, and those are some good paying jobs.
That's a very good question. And honestly, on my drive in this morning, I said my son attends Greenville High, and of course, there's lots of construction going on at County Square. And so driving by, I did take note that there isn't a diverse population of people that are working out there. I'll mention James Jordan at Jordan Construction Company. You might have seen him on 60 Minutes back in the spring. His company is headquartered here, and James is doing a great job. In fact, my middle child works in his office, and they're really reaching out for internships and apprenticeships, and also holding classes on project management to help young people get involved. It is a slow process to engage folks, and Greenville Tech is doing a great job, and also Greenville County Schools, that graduation plus, that they are graduating high school seniors not only with their high school diploma, but some sort of certification that would help reduce those numbers and increase. But it is really by word of mouth and getting out, really beating the ground, the bushes, as they say, to get one person at a time to engage in this work and not leave our community. I personally held 2 workshops with young Black professionals, myself held them. And these folks are going to Charlotte and Rock Hill to find work and social engagement, and Atlanta. And my children are coming back, and I have no doubt they're not going to live and work here. They're going to go elsewhere. I wish that they would stay. But there's a term called representative retail, representative housing, representative social experiences. And by representative, people want to see themselves in the places where they live and work. And we have to do an intentional job of increasing opportunities so that a person who has lived in Greenville all their lives on Main Street is not treated less than a visitor who has come to Greenville for a weekend in a shop or a restaurant. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin.